Okay, welcome to Beyond the Peak podcast. I'm super excited for our guest today. I don't think there's ever going to be a guest where I'm like not going to be excited, but nonetheless, I will say that. And so today we have John Vroman, and I'll quickly read his bio. So John Vroman founded Front Row Dads because he wanted to win at home and not just at work. Over the last 5 years, Front Row Dads has become a diverse group of 230 dads from 12 different countries who share a common bond of choosing to put family first as they grow their businesses. The mission of Front Row Dads is to help men deepen their connection with their children and build a family legacy that they're proud of. Outside of the podcast, live events, and online summits, Front Row Dads has a highly engaged membership that supports each dad in aligning with his family values and staying committed to the most important people in his life. And personally, I'm actually enlisted as a Front Row Dad as well. It's a podcast that I've listened to for over 2 years, and I enlisted only a few months ago. And it's been a really powerful opportunity to just get to be around people that have their values aligned to their family and such. And so without putting too many words into his mouth, as I'm sure he'll have many, many to share, John Vroman, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Welcome to the show, John. Great to have you here.
Guys, I'm pumped for this conversation. Excited to see where the road will take us.
Totally. So the first question, it's actually a pretty intense one. I hope you're ready for it. I need to find out more about your weekly volleyball.
Well, this is the conversation that I will get the most fired up about. So if I'm ever opinionated, it's definitely about my volleyball. I'm pretty easy on the COVID stuff or politics, but when it comes to volleyball, I've only got one way that I view this. Now, man, I'll tell you, all kidding aside, that's one of the greatest joys for me. I look forward to it all week. And it's really touching on a lot of things that are important for me, man. Just putting my feet in the sand, connecting to nature, being around my brothers. And by the way, often other guests that come along. We got a lot of different people out there, kids and wives and friends and all sorts of people.
Yeah, like people like not on the court necessarily, but just hanging out, right?
Yeah, you hate people hanging out and, having picnics and all sorts of stuff. It's just been great to see that community build around something that, a couple of us are really passionate about. And it's been awesome, man. So I love it. Yeah, we could talk about volleyball for the next hour if you want.
Definitely, as much as that could be fun. I do still want to get at least a takeaway from this, because I think there's something to be said on a higher level of getting people together over some, and I don't know if I want to bring it to as granular as a sport, but I think there's still something to be said. And I'd love to hear about, like, how is it that, this has been consistently going on for how long now? Over a year?
Years. No? Yeah. Years.
Yeah. So, like, how did this start? And why do you think that something like this might be important? We'll get some nuggets out of this. Well, I think it's powerful.
Oh yeah, man. It started because I'll give props to my buddy, Tim Nikolive, who, here's a guy who is wildly successful in business and in life. He has done so well, in my opinion, on so many different levels. And I really admire what kind of world he's built for himself. And one of the things I love most about Tim is that he's a learner. So he's always interested in mastering some skill, whether it be, on the volleyball court, which is where this conversation began. It's like, hey, what are you up to? I'm learning volleyball. I'm taking lessons. I'm practicing. I'm like, that's always something I wanted to get into. So that was my inroad into the volleyball world, was Tim. But he does that in every area of his life. Like, he wants to, if we're talking Enneagram, he takes the deep dive. He learns about it. He talks about it, right? Like, whatever it is. And so we just started playing. We literally, just a couple people got out there. And then, if you get enough people who love to invite others, next thing you know, you've got 20 people there, 30 people there. And people are getting better and better and better. And, like you said, there's so many real world lessons that come out of that time together. And I'll give you a practical example that I think will relate to many. I'd been playing for some time, and I said to Tim one day, I'm frustrated that I'm not getting any better. I'm frustrated. I feel like I should be better playing every Saturday. And so Tim, in the way that only Tim can do it, is like, why do you think that? Right? Why do you think you should be better? And he gets me traveling down this. I know what kind of conversation we're going to have when Tim goes, why do you think that is? Why do you think you should be better just because you play every Saturday? I'm like, oh, here we go. We're going to have some fun. But Tim Tim basically backs away and zooms out and starts talking about how in sports, which he's a very good basketball player and he's very good at coaching. He coaches his kids' baseball team and he's very involved. And he actually said, hey, look, you got to back away and slow it down, because if you don't practice at a practice speed, the skills that you want with great intention, you're never going to be able to improve at game speed. So he said, you got to do these drills at a slower pace so that when you get into the game, it's coming more naturally to you. And he really helped me understand the benefit of stepping back and learning something at practice speed, not game speed. And that, and one element at a time, one single element at a time. And over a period of a year, then you start piecing that together. And where is that not true? Where is it not beneficial to take the step back, get the perspective, focus on one thing, master it at practice speed, and then apply it in real time? It's like parenting, right? If you wait till there's a meltdown for you to figure out how you're going to respond in that moment, you're going to be triggered. You're going to start yelling. You're going to lose your cool, just like the kids are losing their cool. But if you can actually talk about it, rehearse it, practice it when you're not triggered, when you're not in a heated moment, then when you enter that space, you're better off. The same thing happens in marriage. Same thing happens in business. It's all that.
That's awesome. John, you unknowingly segued perfectly to the next question. But before we dive into that question, I just want to acknowledge what you said. If you don't practice at practice speed, you'll never be able to improve at game speed. Yeah. And I love how true that is in all areas of your life, whether it be practicing in relationship, whether it be practicing in business, practicing in sports. Slowing down to be in the practice speed will allow you to be faster in the game speed. It was like one of my coaches shared with me, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's kind of the same concept here, is if we slow down to practice, we'll speed up in game. So love that so much, man.
Guys, and on that note, by the way, a quick resource, if we're talking about slowing things down, I literally interviewed this guy 2 hours ago. His name is Carl Honore, and he has 2 TED Talks. Main stage TED Talks that have gotten millions and millions of views. I don't know if you've seen his work, but he talks about, he is the leader in the space of the slow movement, right? The slowing down. And we just had a whole hour conversation on this exact subject and why this is so powerful. Because especially for guys like you two who want to go fast and high performers and achievers, this is something I wrestle with on the regular of how to slow down.
Love that so much, man. Thanks for the insight. And, when you were sharing about, slowing down to practice, one of the things you mentioned is slowing down in relationships for emotional conflicts, so that you can practice it and then, get better when it actually happens. And one of the things that I just finished listening to your podcast with Justin Donald. And one of the things I really noticed is about 3 or 4 times you brought up the emotional reactivity and the challenges you've experienced in the past with emotional reactivity. And you were reflecting to Justin how sometimes it seems like he's always calm in the face of chaos. And that's something that you admire him for, and something that you are consistently trying to embody and practice with your family, with your business, with your kids, and something that you've had difficulty with facing in the past. And I feel like not many people speak up about some of those things, but it's so natural as an entrepreneur, as someone who wants to go fast, as a high performer, to get carried away in the moment with reactivity. And I would love to hear, John, a little bit about that journey of emotional reactivity, how that's negatively affected you in the past, and how you've began to practice embodying responding in those moments versus reacting, and what that's done for your life.
Yeah, well, that's the end of our show, because I'm gonna talk until you cut me off and we end this episode, because I got a lot to say on the subject. I'll try to speak to just what I think are a couple of key points. But honestly, I could talk for hours and hours on this subject, and it's a great one for me. But also, I know that men wrestle with this, some publicly and some silently. I mean, I've had situations where I've known the husband and the wife, and the husband looks like he's got it all dialed in, in every way. And then I talked to the wife and she's like, dude, he comes home, he's yelling at the kids, he's yelling at me. Like, I'm like, really? Are we talking about the same guy? But yeah, I've had moments where, and my wife, and I've said this on my podcast and I've talked about it very openly, and I try to be very transparent because I want to be real with everybody that, look, I'm not proud of what I'm about to say. It is, though, what happened. And I'm admitting that these are things I struggle with, one of which was my wife, in a time when I was freaking out, said, well, if only your front row dads could hear you now, right? Like that type of moment. And I'm grateful for that conversation. I'm grateful for that comment now because she's right. It's not what I would be proud of, but honestly, I'm happy for people to know that I am imperfect. I'm happy for people to know that I have lost my cool and said and done things that in hindsight, I'm like, nope, not the best behavior. Here's a real life example of my journey. Okay. So I've been struggling with this. I've been working on this and I've been making improvements on this for years. And this summer, I wanted to take my kids on an epic adventure. We took a trailer. We did weeks on the road, and it's set out as, I've been working on emotional intelligence for years, and I want to show my kids this summer how to respond with grace in the face of adversity, which turned into the summer of how to lose your shit and then apologize to your kids every single day. It was the summer of apologizing for being an asshole. That was the summer. And so I'm being completely honest about the fact that what's interesting is I remember getting so frustrated with that. I remember talking to my band, which for everybody who doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about, the band in Front Row Dads is the small group. So 4 guys who meet monthly to talk, real conversations, the stuff that you don't normally talk about, right? In life, even with some of your closest friends. Well, I said to these guys, hey, I'm really sad. I'm really disappointed in myself. I'm really frustrated that I set out for this to be the summer of like not losing my cool and showing my kids how to handle pressure, like with integrity and with poise and composure and all this. And it's turned out to be the summer of losing my absolute mind and then apologizing. And my band reminded me that, that is not necessarily a bad thing, that you could argue that my kids would have been better served by having a dad who just responded perfectly to everything, but it's not what happened. And it's arguable to say that by me being real with my kids and me being a human in front of my kids, they got to see what's likely more of what they'll face in life, which is to be emotionally charged, to be emotionally triggered, to have difficult situations, and then to work your way through it and apologize to those that it may have affected and to learn from it. And as long as you can show progress, that is the most important thing. Can you be better today than you were? And that might mean better at apologizing. It might not mean that you've nailed the piece where you never lose your cool. However, this has been a journey for me. And I mean, it goes way, way back. It goes back a decade. It goes back longer than that. And here's what used to happen, guys. And I'll keep this brief so that we can, again, I'm not going to get on my soapbox and rant forever, but here's what I'll tell you. Since I mentioned Enneagram, for anybody who's studied this is just a personality type, right? For anybody who hasn't studied it, it's a personality type. For anybody who has, you'll know a 7, which I am, is an enthusiast. And one of the things that's great about being around enthusiasts is like, we have silver linings for days. We always want to see the bright side of things. We're always like pursuing adventure. Yep. And here's what happened. For many years, I just buried the tough stuff. I just like, hey, what's the gift in the challenge? I just did that through everything. What's the gift in the challenge? And I used to be critical of people that couldn't find the gift in the challenge more quickly. But what ended up happening was that over the years, I just buried the stuff that bothered me to the point to where you can't bury it for that long. You can't hold the ball underwater for that long without it just popping up. And that's what happens. So the more that you just get like, I'm not going to fake this anymore. I'm not going to, what's the gift my way through this anymore. I'm just going to be real. It eventually comes up and then it has to be dealt with. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm dealing with stuff that I silver lining my way through most of my 20s and 30s.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I really appreciate, and I mean, you do it on your podcast all the time, and I appreciate you doing it here as well. It's just that genuine authenticity, and I think that's one of the best things that makes you such a great teacher is your ability to just like lay it out on the table. And so I really want to appreciate and respect that. And I know that even what you said has also not done justice to how much hell you kind of went through at the same time. And then I think I'd love to actually touch on something that's powerful that you may want to expand on as well is how you said, hey, I set into that journey or adventure with X intention. And I think that will often get a lot of people screwed, for lack of a better word, because they come in with such an idea of what it should be that as soon as it deviates, it feels like failure or not the right thing or this or that or the other. And so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on, how do you feel maybe you could have shown up differently with that intention in a way that's maybe less it must be versus this is what I'd like it to be. This is the direction. And I'm open to imperfections kind of thing.
And real quick, John, before you ask, I'm going to just add an or to that question. Or was the difficulty needed for you to achieve the intention? And I'll just leave it at that.
That's right. Yeah. Well, all of that. Here's the cause of a lot of pain, right? It's always expectations in reality. It's always expectations in reality. When I think about my children and so much of the pain that they experience, it's, in our home, it's that as a parent, I didn't set the proper expectation, and therefore the reality was very different than what I set as an expectation. It happens in our relationship with my wife and I of what she was expecting on a birthday and what her reality was, right? And when we don't align on those two things, that's a very challenging place for us to be. And this is why years ago, I settled on the fact that in many ways, the key to happiness is low standards, right? Like in many ways, the key to happiness is low standards. And this is coming from a guy who constantly was trying to find the higher standard, the moral ground that I could really, and the integrity of something and creating this epic life, through affirmations and all the things we learn in the personal growth space that are great things. Nothing wrong with any of intentions or affirmations or questions or whatever they might be. But the real challenge exists of having too many rules. It's like with my kids. I have a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was really wrestling with screen time. It's like, what should the screen? And we tried everything. We had a sticker system and a dollar system. And we had 30 minutes a day only. And then we had do whatever you want and they'll regulate themselves. And we literally tried. I read all the stuff. I read everything. I did. And I came up with this document that was like, the most complicated screen time agreement. And it was literally like a page, 72 bullets, right? And
did you force them to sign on it too and everything?
Dude, I had a contract. I mean, it was the whole thing, right? And I posted it in the group, and some of the more experienced guys, like the guys who traveled down the road before, were like, too complicated, right? Like, just real simple, like nobody's ever going to follow that. And it's like many things in life where when you have too many rules, it's going to be hard to follow. So I think that a lot of the intentions and expectations, it needs to be really simple and it needs to be something that's really attainable. Having a goal to not lose your shit for an entire summer, I was setting myself up for failure.
100%.
Right? I mean, that's a terrible intention. Arguably, you're right, David. Like the intention kind of revealed itself in the end. It should have been how to just be real in the face of adversity and whatever comes up in that moment, and just to be, to be honest and real and handle what comes my way. Yeah, man, I've needed to, and it's helped me in business. I've needed to do this in my family. I've needed to do this in business, is just simplify to the point. Simplify has led me to more happiness in my life. That's why we landed on 3 core values in Front Row Dads. 3 core values. I remember when I did family values, I mean, by the time I got to the 7th family value, like the glazed over eyes of my family is like, we're never going to remember any of this. Totally. We're not going to do any of this. Simple, 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 simple.
Powerful. This is actually a pretty good transition to our next question that we'd love to ask as it relates to like sort of emotional mastery and intelligence, and just like the ability to navigate, I guess, even like ego and all these kinds of different things. Because I'm really curious about this, which is that you have recently decided, and correct me if I'm wrong, but recently decided to move out of the CEO role of Front Row Dads to position someone else there. And super excited to hear what you have to say about it. But from what I've heard thus far, it's basically just that idea of like, hey, like you created it because you needed it. And so you're kind of wanting to step into that role of like, cool, I want to have it now.
That's exactly.
So yeah, I would love to hear so much more about not only just how you came to that decision, but like, how are you navigating the ego of letting it go and of having someone else come in and just all those things.
Dude, well, there's a couple of things we can speak to here. One, my buddy Tucker Max comes to mind. So many know Tucker as an author, and now he was the founder of Book in a Box, which is now Scribe, and they're doing millions and millions of dollars of revenue and killing it, you know. And I think about Tucker, I think he recently published an article about why he fired himself as the CEO. And I think that's a great article for somebody to go read. And it speaks to a lot of what I got to, which is there's a lot of roles, by the way, that we need to fire ourselves from. So if I reverse engineer this, I'm going to actually connect a few threads here. Okay. And I'm even going to make a few notes so that I can bring all this together. And one of them is, okay, so I'm going to bring Tim back into the conversation, my bandmate, Tim. And again, for anybody who just maybe tuned into this, like when I say bandmate, I'm talking about these three guys that I join with every month for 2.5 hours, and we take a deep dive. These guys are the most influential people in my life because we get into the biggest conversations. Well, Tim, he helped me to figure out in my business what my organizational chart should look like. And the way that we got there was first design what you want your family life to look like. First, let's look at your unique ability, your zone of genius. So Tim has learned a lot from a guy named Jim Dethmer. Jim Dethmer, the author of the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, is our featured expert, by the way, as we record this in 1 month from today, November 18th in Front Row Dads. He is our keynote for our online summit. So Jim Dethmer, by the way, like father, grandfather, like I admire this guy so much. And he's been on our podcast with a show about being present with your kids. Now, Jim talks about your zone of genius a lot. And he talks about how one of the ways to be emotionally intelligent is to be doing the things that you are supposed to be doing. So if we're looking at your Enneagram, if we're looking at your Colby, if we're looking at your CVI or your Myers-Briggs, or we can list off all the other personality tests, right? If you're just using the data that you get without any test, what gives you energy and what drains you? Where are you naturally creating a lot of momentum, and where are you constantly struggling? And maybe you've got I should be good at this, right? Or I need to be good at everything. And sometimes it feels that way as an entrepreneur or business owner. But, Tim, going back to Tim, he whiteboards out in his office what an ideal life will look like for me. How many hours, how much income. And finally, I start realizing I'm doing all these things I shouldn't be doing, right? I'm involved in so many things I really have no business being involved in, because honestly, one of the reasons I'm yelling at my kids and fighting with my wife is because I'm spending all my energy during the week trying to move things I should not even be touching. Right? Like, so if you're doing work where you're in your zone of genius, then you show up on a Friday to your family, or after work, or before work, or during work, during a lunch break, and you're not exhausted. You're not beat down. You have actually something in the tank for your family. right? You have something in the tank to go out on a date with your wife. And it's not just talking about how exhausted you are from the work you're doing. That's why she or he might hate your work, right? It's like a competing priority for your life. It's so here's the thing. All these things tie together. All these things weave together. And honestly, I think that it's finding what I want to communicate is the part that's worked for me is finding out what I'm supposed to do and only doing that. And then releasing, right? Releasing attachment. Now, I want to tell you about a second piece of this, but let me, and I think I can, let me give you the 2-minute version, because I think you guys are going to really appreciate this. It has something you said, Oliver, which has to do with your ego. One of our members, Kelly Flanagan, wrote a book, which our group loved. His latest book is called True Companions. And he talks about this concept called the ego castle. Have you heard me talk about this, Oliver?
Oh, totally. Multiple times.
Yeah. So,
I'm not so excited.
David, do you know this one?
I do not. So I'm excited to hear.
All right. So let me give you the quick version of this. And this is important for people to understand, because I think it really helps us to align with what we're supposed to do and the role it played and how I was able to step away from, or stepping away. By the way, this is a plan. This is going to be a long runway to step away as the CEO, but I've started it now. So the deal is that when you're in elementary school and you start to develop your ego, and let's agree that your ego is your false self. The ego is this what you create to protect yourself so that you don't get hurt. Your first part of your ego that everybody builds, and usually it's in elementary school, is your wall, is to protect yourself. So name brand clothing is the easiest way to describe it. I wear this particular type of clothing. You think differently of me. I've protected myself. Just because I put up a front, I've got a wall, right? Looks like clothing, but it's a wall. The second part of our ego castle usually comes about in junior high, and it's where we learn that the best defense is a good offense. So we have weapons. We have cannons, we have archers, we can cut people down, we can go after people. Before they can hurt us, we hurt them. Before you cut me out of your life, I'm cutting you out of my life, right? Like that's a junior high is a rough place to be, man. There's a lot of archers, a lot of swordsmen, a lot of people with a lot of weapons in junior high. And then in high school, you realize that your ego castle becomes complete when you have a throne of righteousness. And that's usually where you find your thing. You're like, I'm a jock, I'm a nerd, I'm a this, I'm a that. You start to label yourself as like, this is how I'm going to be right in the world. I found the right way, and this is who I'm going to be. And you sit on that throne and you cast judgment against everybody else, but you're right. And hopefully as we evolve, we realize that our ego castle also has a drawbridge, and we can walk down and be ourselves with people, and we can let the guard down. Now, your ego castle is not bad, and you're never going to do away with it. It's there for a reason. Not everybody's out to serve you. You do need to protect yourself in this world. You shouldn't just be naked and run through the grocery store and be like, I'm just being myself. Like there are limitations. I thought that's where we're going with this. I was really excited. There are limitations, and we need to understand the world that we live in. But dude, for me to understand the ego that was at work and why I was working so hard to protect myself from being like the guy who didn't work hard. Like even that's a front, right? Working hard is a story that we tell ourselves so that other people won't judge us for not working or earning it, right? You didn't earn it. Right. And so there's a lot of that was showing up in my life, and I had to figure out what that was. Even the charity Front Row Foundation was a big ego play for me, because ultimately I was serving, which was a good thing. But the truth is I was in many ways serving because I wanted to make sure that everybody who knew me knew I was a good person. Right. If you want to really know my heart, you'll know that I will give till I am depleted, till I'm not even sleeping, so that I can help other people. See how good of a person I am? See how much I care about people? I will suffer financially. Yeah. That's how much I care. And it was like an act. It's like, right? It's an act, but all it was to do is I didn't want people to hate me, because I really just want to be liked. And so a lot of this is driving my life, man. And ultimately the question is, how did I come to step away or want to step away? Because I feel like I can now, because I'm free. And I feel like my people are going to love me, who are going to love me for who I am. And maybe my greatest gifts will be given to the world if I'm just doing the things I was born to do.
Mic drop.
There's so much to unpack there.
Damn, John. First of all, I just want to acknowledge you again for, giving us the drawbridge into your own life, right? Because it feels like this whole podcast is becoming a drawbridge into, you know, the challenges and the difficulties and the things you've been up against in your life, and the way you've constantly allowed yourself to surrender more and more and more and more. And I feel like it's beautiful, you know, that we can't stop that things are going to happen to us, or we can't stop that we're going to do things that are going to be out of alignment to what we think we should be doing, or out of alignment to our higher self, or we can't stop ourselves from acting from the place of ego, or from acting from our righteous castle. What we can do is use those opportunities to reflect, to shift, to ask ourselves, where can we express ourselves more vulnerably, or where can we lean into a version of ourselves that we feel more at peace with than this version of ourselves that is just protecting our ego from the rest of the world. And so before I ask you the next question, I just want to acknowledge that it's clear that you've done the work. It's clear that you are consistently doing the work and holding up that mirror within yourself to ask yourself, hey, is the version of you that you're showing up as today the version of you that you want to be showing up as tomorrow?
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome, man. And so this, again, it's like almost you have a sixth sense when you're asking our questions, because you keep bringing it back to the next question that we want to ask. But I really want to bring the conversation, and this is, again, perfect timing to what you said about the righteousness, about your speaking career before you stepped into Front Row Dads, because in listening to hearing about your success with speaking and how much you accomplished, what I found really, really beautiful is the moment that you decided that your speaking career was actually taking too much of your life. And you were no longer prioritizing your family, and you were no longer prioritizing the things that were important to you. And what a beautiful representation of living in the righteousness of the castle, where you are getting $20,000 speaking gigs. You are on stage. You are loved by so many people. People are coming up to you and thanking you. When you look at your family, that ego righteousness, naturally the castle falls down, because you look at what's important to you and those things aren't being prioritized. And so I'd love to hear about the realization that led you from standing in the righteous castle to realizing that it was costing you your family, it was costing you the things that were important to you. And I know this also happened with the foundation that you built. And Oliver, maybe you want to extend on that question, because you're the one that shared that with me.
Yeah, I was just real quick to say that even from that, you sort of almost did something similar with the Front Row Foundation, and how I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you actually have a tattoo of Front Row Foundation, right? Is it? Yeah. I think it's on your arm, or and how you got it. There you go. Right. Which is awesome. But what I loved about something you mentioned in other podcasts is that it's brought up mixed feelings for you and your wife. Right. Yeah. And so, I would love to let you take that wherever you want, because I think there's so much to be said there of people that are needing to navigate that.
Yeah, that shift, it in the moment, it felt like it was taking a long time to make. And in hindsight, it felt like it was just like that, it was a moment in time. But, and there's a lot of epiphanies. There's a lot of ahas. And there's one that I tell about being at a party and somebody's like, what do you do? And I'm talking about being a speaker and an author and the charity. And then and then I have this, I'm a father and I'm a husband, and then I do some other stuff. And that was an epiphany of like how I identify as a person. So that's where family man with a business, not businessman with a family, comes from. There was another epiphany that I had when, and this one, by the way, was the most powerful. And I'll just get right to it, because this is the one that stung the most. And I'm grateful. It came from my wife. My wife is Tatiana, and she was born and raised in Russia. She moved here when she was 18 to go to the University of Georgia. And I will tell you that Tatiana, when she gets into this particular character, this particular archetype, I call it the Russian assassin, which is the no bullshit. She just hits you right between the eyes with what you need to hear. And it's not always easy. Like, my ego castle wall is strong. But she said to me one day that she goes, you are more of a moment maker for other people than you are for your family. And that was a big moment for me. And man, I was offended by that. I got all, defensive, of course, because I wanted to talk about my heart's in the right place. Like, are you kidding? I've done so much for so many, like, I just want to get into the defensive, right? I provide for our family. Like, this life that you live is like, it's all made possible because of all this that I do. But here's the thing, man. At the end of the day, she was right. At the end of the day, she was right. If I'm being honest with myself, which is what needed to happen, right? You can get so good at telling the story to the world through marketing. And none of it was a lie, by the way. Like, nothing I said to the world was a lie. Nothing I ever said about everything I believe. I wrote in the book, The Front Row Factor, where I tell the story of the Front Row Foundation. And it's all true. Everything is true. There's no lie. But and all of my marketing, it was all honest. It was all, I believe everything there. But there were stories that I was telling that were having an impact on my family, because of how much I put into that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to help somebody who has a life-threatening illness. There's nothing wrong with standing on a stage, sharing a message and trying to help people. But here's the story. The story was like, well, look, we were broke. Okay. First of all, I stepped away from a high paying corporate job. And then I became a broke speaker. And I was literally, they were foreclosing on our home. I was broke. And the year after that, I won a speaking award and made six figures. The year after that, I won another speaking award and made 200,000. And then I made 300,000. And then I made 400,000. And here's the thing. When I was making more and more money, it was like, I'd say to my wife, look, I used to make $5,000 a speech. Now I make $10,000. If we just do 1 year of 10K speeches, if we could just do 1 year of 15K speeches, if we could, right? And it's like, but the thing that was the lie, and here's the part, I was always one more season. Exactly. It was always one more busy season. It was always one more thing. And that was the moment when I'm like, my son is 6 years old and I have been telling the story that I care about family and family should come first. And, and I'm an entrepreneur because of time freedom and I want to make my own schedule. And the truth is I'm on the road 180 days a year. The truth is my kids don't know me that well. The truth is I'm always going to my office early in the morning because I got a speech 10 days from now. That's the highest paid speech I've ever had. And I need to go prepare for it. But man, there were a lot of lies I was telling myself through the process. Like, I need to go to my office to make sure I nail this speech and I can't do breakfast with the family.
Love that. And it's, again, so much to unpack. I think what I'd love to touch on is one of the hard things is being able to face those painful truths. And it's kind of, because you sort of alluded to this, right? So all that forward-facing marketing, sometimes it comes out this way, and eventually it comes kind of back to you, and you start to believe it too. And you can get caught up in your own, again, even if it's truthful and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, marketing has a bit of fluff in it, and all the things. You basically, it's putting what's it called? A mentor of mine said, not a flashlight, like a spotlight. Marketing is putting a spotlight on the highly successful things. That's
sure.
what it is. And so you can end up drinking your own Kool-Aid. And so I really think I want to just emphasize and let land that idea of like, you've got to be ready to hear those Russian assassin truths and have those people in your corner, right? Have those people that are willing to.
The women in our life who do, because my fiance, she is the assassin. Totally. She's Peruvian. And so she is a Peruvian version of the fire. And like, God bless her, not in the moment when she tells me, but after, when I realize how truthful it is, like, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before I move on to the next question, David, did you have any like primary reflection from that? I feel like there was just so much fire and love as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just comes back to the theme of this whole conversation, which really sounds like, which is really unpacking the masks of entrepreneurship and high performance and that whole world. It's like, John, it feels like your whole life is an example of unpacking those masks and coming deeper and deeper into your own authenticity and transparency, which is so beautiful. And I think I'm excited to, hear about the way all of those values and all of that life has been brought into your life, now, and how you're living that now. But I know, Oliver, you have a specific question around that you feel free to jump in.
Totally. So, I mean, that's really it, right? Like we've kind of gone into a lot of different depths here, and I'd love to now basically come to sort of a head of like, with all of these, failures or pains or this and that, the other, what does that look like now? Like, how have you extracted that into the now? And what is sort of what I would love to brand right now and say, you're beyond the peak lifestyle, right?
Dude,
and of course, at the same time, how are you maintaining that? Which is a big thing.
Okay. I'm so excited to talk about this, guys, because it has been a journey and it's better now than it's ever been. And I want to say there's still a lot of messed up stuff. Like, so let's make sure that I am not presenting like I somehow figured it all out and I've now arrived at the place of like an expert father, husband, etc. I have messed up recently. I'm going to mess up. I'm sure of it. And I'm still a work in progress, but here's what's better. Okay. So I'm so excited to tell you this, Oliver. I don't know if you've heard this, but I had this realization, a week ago, and I just moved into a new house. 6 years ago, I moved to Austin. And 12 days ago, I moved into a new house in Austin, just a few miles down the road from where I used to live, but radically different move. Let me explain. Coming from Philadelphia, New Jersey, moving to Austin, I was just about to launch the Front Row Factor book. In fact, I told my wife it's a terrible time to move because I'm in the middle of a book launch, but she was adamant about moving. So I was angry at her because she was getting in the way of my work, right? Like that was the whole story. My kids and my family interrupt my work versus my work is interrupting my family. So when I got to Austin, I remember telling her, I need to set up my office. Like you wanted to do this move, you do the move. I'm going to set up my office and you unpack the boxes. This was your idea. You wanted to do it in the middle of a book launch, right? Like I'm sure I said it with a lot of sarcasm too. And so I delivered that nasty message and I did it. I set up my office and I got to work and she worked on the house and I was angry. And whenever she needed something, I was resentful that she was interrupting me. Like, see, I told you you'd need me. And like, I'm in the middle of this book launch, paying our bills, building our family. And it was all just, ego. But here's the thing. Okay, let's be honest here, guys. Let's be honest. If you can't feed your family, I understand you need to work hard. I understand that if you cannot put breakfast on the table, wake up early and go to work, right? Like, but if you can feed your family, a lot of beyond that becomes like, I just want to kill it at work. I hide at work. I'm a king at work.
The easiest thing is to do is to be at work.
Yeah, that's right. The easiest thing is, baby, you got the kids. I'm going to go to work and then I'm a king in that space, right? Yeah. So, all right. So here's what happens in the last 2 weeks. I move into the house, this new house. I'm thrilled about it. And dude, I'm setting up my kids' room. I'm helping Tatiana with the kitchen. I'm getting things dialed in. My mother-in-law's living with us right now, and I'm getting her set up. And I'm taking the kids to school in the middle of as I'm like, baby, I know you've been working hard unpacking boxes, and like, let me take the kids to school. I took them like 3 or 4 or 5 times when it wasn't my, quote unquote turn, or it wasn't on the schedule. I just surprised her in the morning. I'm like, I'm going to take the kids for you this morning. And she left. There were so many wins. And then about a week in, I had just set up my office about 7 days in. And I was laying in bed that night and I looked over at Tatiana and I said, babe, something just hit me. My office was the last room that I set up on this move. And I said, 6 years ago, it was the first room. Because 6 years ago, family man with a business, not businessman with a family, was a statement that was an ideal I was wanting to live towards. And I said 6 years later, after a lot of looking in the mirror and being honest with myself about my shortcomings, finally has become an unconscious competence of mine where I'm not thinking about it so often, but I'm actually living it. So I'm no longer talking about being a family man with a business. I'm actually doing it. And that feels amazing. And now instead of hearing, from my wife, hey, thanks for all the speeches and thanks for going out and making money, but your kids don't know you. And she's now just like, man, I'm so blown away by how present you are with the kids. I'm so blown away by how, you've put your family first. You're actually living it. And now when she says, she used to say, well, if your front row dads could only see you now, as kind of a slap in the face.
In a sarcastic way.
She's now saying, hey, man, if your front row dads could see you now and see you, how you show up for your family and how you're there for your kids. And again, not perfect at all. Plenty of errors to talk about, but man, am I really proud of the time that I'm putting in and the space that I'm creating for my family. So I'm thrilled. And I want other people to have the same. I want other people, look, I'm 46. I've got a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old. I've screwed up a lot for a lot of years. And I want to help people that are either just starting this journey to not make the same mistakes that I made. I want to help shortcut them a little bit, which is, I think, what we're supposed to do generation after generation, right? And I'm still in this. And I know there's a lot of guys who have traveled the road before me that I think my best dad work and my best husband work and my best family work is still out there. And I'm grateful that I found out all this now and not 20 years from now, where I had all the regret and couldn't go back in time.
Yeah, I love the move story and the way that was so different from 6 years ago. And I've seen it. Like I took a look at your feed on Instagram, and I was seeing all the adventures that you guys are going on, and all the time dedicated to your family and doing kung fu with your son and the different things you guys build together. And I was like, that is so awesome how much you're prioritizing that world. And you could really tell that value that you set your sights on 6 years ago is now embodied, is now integrated in your life. And I want to reflect that back to the audience and the viewers and the entrepreneurs that are going to listen to this and high performers that, you may have a life right now that you're parts of your life that you're discontent with, or you may have a value that you're not embodying to the way that you really want to. And John, I think you're such a powerful testimony to, if you just keep doing the work, if you keep setting your sight on the value, if you put it on the wall, right? Like you have right there, front row dads, family men with businesses. If you surround yourself with people that represent the values that you're seeking to become, if you set your sights on making that a reality, then through failure, through challenge, eventually that thing that you say is who you want to be will become who you are. And even if there are missteps, even if there are challenges, because you're not perfect, and I love that you reflected back and said that so many times, you are still embodying it and integrating it to a level that you never had before. And what a testimony to progress, to patience, to consistency, to really setting your sights on something that important to you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I'll actually piggyback a bit on what you said, David, too. You made me think of a quote that you and I started to follow a lot recently, and that, John, you probably know as well, because it comes from Jeff Woods. We actually had Jeff Woods on our last episode, which was awesome. He brought up front row dads, of course, but directionally correct. Correct. And what I think, again, it's like when you 6 years ago set your sights on what it would be to be a family man first, you didn't know exactly what that would actually look like. Right. You didn't tell yourself like, oh, it's going to be that when I move next time, my office is going to be the last thing I set up.
That's exactly right.
But you were directionally correct by just knowing that that's generally where you want to go. And you just keep taking that step forward. And eventually you arrive, quote unquote, somewhere you could have never foreseen, but that you just chose the right direction.
Dude. And here's the thing. I've realized about front row dads now in hindsight, 6 years, multiple events, 242 guys in 12 different countries. And here's what I'm realizing is that there is an atmosphere of accountability. The atmosphere of accountability. So I'm a 46-year-old man. I don't need somebody calling me to wake me up in the morning. Yeah. But what I do appreciate is the atmosphere of accountability in the group. And what I mean by that is, like, when I see another man succeeding with his family in a very specific way, and it's just constantly being promoted to me. I want to be in charge of the marketing that comes my way as much as possible. With the world that we currently live in and the amount of marketing that we are exposed to, I want to control that. I want to be the chief marketing officer of the Vroman landscape and home. And I want to control that sphere as much as possible. And so one of them is by choosing this community. I'm choosing to be in a place where I'm constantly like replicating something I saw somebody else do. And I'm watching other guys do the same thing. Like one guy has a newborn or a young child under 1, let's say, and he sees another guy in the group who went camping with his child under 1. And he says, I didn't think that was possible for me because I was just thinking when my kids are 5 and 6 and 7, I'm going to go camping. He goes, but I seeing another guy go camping with his 6-month-old. He's like, I could do that. And then even like, I'm going to give even more credit to Tim Nikolai. Tim Nikolai right now, by the way, is like literally landing in Austin today as we record this. And for the last 3 months, he's been traveling with his family. He was in Moscow, then he's in Nice in France, then he's in Spain teaching in Madrid at Acton Business School. But dude, he literally, people are meeting him, and he told me, he's like, people meet me and they're like, wait a minute. So you're like in your 30s, you're teaching at the business school. You are spending a month in Madrid, and you have 5 children, and your youngest is like 3 months old. And you are, so wait a minute, like
standard boom.
You're literally traveling the world with 5 children between the ages of under 1 up to 12. Right. And it's like, these are the type of like experiences and standards. And I'm not saying that everybody has to do that to live an epic life. I don't care if you ever travel. I don't care if you go overseas. I don't care if you have 1 kid or 5 kids or whatever. And it's not about that. It's just about what's possible in whatever way, whether you're admiring somebody who's homeschooling their kids, or you're admiring somebody for whatever they're doing. The fact that they're eating all organic and vegan, or that they only eat meat, or they whatever, who cares? Right. The point is, like, you do you, but when you are doing the best version of you, and you're doing it in a way where I can see that, and we have shared values, then I get to see all the different ways we can live within those values. And boom, that atmosphere of accountability changes everything for me. And I could literally give you 100 examples of how this has shown up in my life, from the aspect of health and how I am the healthiest I've ever been because of this community. I will also tell you that I'm the wealthiest I've ever been, literally dollars on paper, because of this community. I am also the best husband and dad I've ever been. I've worked the least ever because of this community, and that I have created the most epic experiences. Like, I literally, the fun levels through the roof because of this community, because they just keep giving me ideas. And that is regardless of the community. This isn't just a sole pitch for Front Row Dads. Like, I hope it is for the right person. I hope somebody's out there like, glad I heard about Front Row Dads. Like, maybe I'm the perfect guy. Maybe you are. And maybe you know somebody who would be. But more so, it's a pitch for the perfect community for you. It's the perfect whatever community. I don't care what mastermind or church or gathering or group or neighborhood association. I don't care what it is. But if you can lock arms, and especially in an uncertain world that we live in right now, where community is the greatest survival tool, community is the greatest tool for thriving in any endeavor. And when shit hits the fan in any way, shape, or form, right? You want to be in a good community. Period. You want to have people that you love and that love you and that you could lock arms with, because that resource, man, changes everything. So atmosphere of accountability, the right people, the right values, that's what we all need to be chasing, creating, building, and appreciating.
Let's go. So we're coming to the end of our time here, John. And I would love to know if you're happy with that as a closing statement, or if you'd like to follow it up with any last words, action steps, anything like that.
Final words would be, love you guys and love what you're up to, and appreciate the time.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. I think everything you just shared with community is like really what Oliver and I are trying to do here with Beyond the Peak Lifestyle, is surrounding ourselves around people like yourself who not only care about success, who not only care about being driven and creating businesses that are meaningful, but also desire to prioritize their family, prioritize their lifestyle, know that it's not only about that. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on here. We appreciate it so much. We know our audience is going to appreciate it. Just, thanks so much.
This is awesome, man. Thank you guys. I love what you're up to, and there's no doubt you guys are doing important work.
For sure. And by the way, before we let you go, what's the easiest place people can find you, Front Row Dads, or any other thing that people might be interested in?
Everything in one place, frontrowdads.com. That's the easiest way. Or if somebody wanted to try to connect with me specifically, John Vroman is the handle everywhere where I could possibly be found.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. Love you, love the time, and just everything. Amazing.
Thanks, guys.